Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, story-driven action-focused sequel to Final Fantasy VII Remake. The game was released in February of 2024 by Square Enix. While Final Fantasy VII Rebirth does have an ATB bar inspired by the turn-based system in Final Fantasy VII, the ATB only applies to special abilities and magic, allowing the player to attack with combos and use synergy skills freely, just as you would in an action-adventure game. Whether or not I see the remake trilogy as an RPG doesn't really matter now, seeing as how the first part is established as not only a part in the series, but a full game all by itself. Also, without any promises, a specific franchise like Final Fantasy VII, or any franchise for that matter, doesn't necessarily have to follow any suit of genre. Regardless of what we may expect of it, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, in my opinion, is more of an RPG than its prequel. This time around, we enter a huge open Gaia, with lots of events to unlock, a balanced level of fighting, so much loot and material to collect, and what appears to be a deeper choice-making system. I'm only a week into the game, but I can also assume that Rebirth is more of a full game than Remake, even though Square Enix says the game will end at the Forgotten Capital. There are so many things to do in and out of town that players can spend tens of hours searching for treasure, gathering world battle intel, and playing many games. Still, playable are the memorable attractions from the Gold Saucer, Fort Condor, and a host of new additions such as the card game called Queen's Blood. The excess of new and classic minigames increases the overall replayability, but they also can hinder you from progressing the story. Certain classics like arm wrestling, fortune telling, basketball, and snowboarding are all absent from the package, but new games are added in their place. While you are allowed to progress immediately from one main story event to the next, just as in Remake, sometimes the side events are woven into the story, even though they're clearly not necessary to do for reaching your goal. The side stuff can be fun for a first playthrough, but may discourage a second if you're forced to win a card tournament again just to battle the next form of Genova. The beginning of the game allows you to skip the Nibelheim flashback, but skipping that card game makes more sense to me than skipping a playable portion of the story. This would be excluding the long QTE or slow time event, such as the crawling to Sephiroth scene in Nibelheim. Combat is just as fun to play as before, with the addition of aerial combat and new synergy abilities, which are better noted as tag team limit breaks. I still prefer the grounded style of fighting from the first game, but I think the synergy system is better here than it was in Intermission. Intermission was a death blow of an expansion, where enemies are twice as hard as those in Remake. Rebirth has enough battle encounters to help players adapt better to the newly introduced system. If acquiring more loot or prizes turns out to not be essential, then the core pacing of Rebirth is without flaw. The combat can be tough, but that mostly depends on how much challenge the player wants from its truly addictive gameplay. Cloud's parry ability isn't so easy this time around, but it's not like we expected parries to begin with, and with a wider array of weapons, armor, and materia, there are now more ways to come out victorious. Graphics are noticeably better. There are not a lot of fuzzy textures as in Remake. Most of the visuals are high quality, they're sharp, run smoothly through the regions, although the water effects still look goopy, and I've noticed how NPCs and some textures stop moving when viewed from a far distance. It's hard to tell if it's a creative decision or for preserving frame rate. but it's not game-breaking bad. Music is all over this game. There are a host of renditions on familiar FF7 tracks, also some new music that is exclusive for Rebirth. Rebirth is a sound to behold for Final Fantasy fans, while at the same time being unique for newcomers. My only swell would be how often the Chocobo theme plays, but it is impressive how it changes based on the region. Sound direction is better in scene, but in-game volume doesn't always level at your position. For example, there's a scene where we meet Hojo at the beach. I can hear Hojo speaking right next to me, but he's farther away than he sounds. Another thing I'd like to say about the graphics though is on world design. The world is huge with lots of ground to cover. I think the Costa del Sol coral region is how I would like to see the grasslands region. The grasslands in Rebirth has a lot of verticality and depth, making it a chore to navigate. The Junon region is like this too, with rugged terrain out-touching the ocean to the east of the Cannon City. It may be personal, but I expected the grasslands to be flat with green trees, hills, and yellow flowers, just like in the original. Rebirth's world design holds its own though, and it still looks good. Landmarks from the original game, such as the railway to Coral, can be identified without being obvious. The spacious railway stretches so far that players would think twice before going on foot. Rebirth is vast and so overlaid with detail. It makes me wonder if I'm bypassing areas that I think are not in the game.
Need my help, do you? Want some more? Suck on this! Kiss my ass!
I've said it before, there is much fighting to be had, far more than in Remake. However, I still find myself using certain materia and abilities for nostalgic pleasure rather than strategy. Just like in Remake, I feel tempted to use every single character just to see what cool new things they can do. Playing with Cloud is comfortable enough, but when Yuffie is added to the team, I'm willing to throw my strategy on the line just to try her out. Materia such as Morph works by first dwindling the enemy's health down to critical. If you use Morph too early, you have a decreased chance of transforming the enemy into an item. This type of materia rarely works in Rebirth, because the AI-controlled party member will likely destroy the enemy before you even get the chance. There is a lot of new materia to try as well, mostly stat boosters and AI action modifiers. Most new materia is support blue and independent magenta, but I still prefer using green or magic materia. The assess materia still works the same way it did in Remake, but I think you should be able to get the monster's weakness simply by attacking it with the right element or spell. A higher level assess would also be a cool idea, where you could get a vision of the enemy that shows you how to counter its deadliest attack. Why isn't that a thing? March 15, 2024. I've encountered an error with the game. The bug makes it so I can't fast travel, use the vehicle, or ride a chocobo. It breaks the game in a way that makes it so I can't reach the next story objective. I'm sure that this bug can be patched easily, but as it stands, it can make a lot of users restart the game or make use of their last manual save. The game doesn't use multiple autosaves to combat bugs, so if you don't have a viable manual save, then you're stuck at a buggy checkpoint. I haven't saved manually for the last 5 character levels, but I won a lot of card matches and side quests during that time. Starting my last manual save would cause me to lose all of that progress. It makes me question if normalizing autosave is really a good thing. As for an update on the minigames, maybe the rest of them will be added later. I don't know, but it's not really a big deal for me. I realized that the game makes you participate in gold saucer attractions for main story progression. My last manual save was just after entering the resort, so I have to do those events again. You don't need to fully complete the attractions, but you do have to visit them. And I think this wastes time, even though it ensures you don't miss out on recreated moments. A lot of the events are altered too, just like in Remake. So interest in the story and the banter really depends on how much you like changes. Speaking of changes, the series is known for bending the rails on events from Final Fantasy VII to give players a fresh and new experience. For example, in FF7 Remake, I'm not expecting the rails to Sector 5 to be straightforward. On the plus side, however, it's not at all mazy like in the original, and also more realistic. With Rebirth, I am now unprepared for the mazy Gungaga region, and needing to find my way to the old reactor to battle Scarlet's Megazord. In the original game, Gungaga was just a small area to fight the Turks and meet with Zack's parents, but in Rebirth, realism is the branch for making it more believable. This style of direction is fresh, but the way that I see Final Fantasy VII just won't be the same. Chocobo navigation is either just right or too slow, depending on what type of breed you are using. The Ocean Chocobo is probably the easiest to use because it soars on a water thruster and has less restriction. The Mountain Chocobo is the worst. It can only climb walls with chocobo tracks on them, and it climbs about as fast as 1996's Lara Croft. I'm positive that the mountain chocobos in the original game never climbed mountains this slowly, but again, realism. The Ocean Chocobo isn't perfect either. There's a mountain that you aren't allowed to thrust over, even though you seemingly can. The area of interest across the mountain cannot be reached unless you get there the way the game wants you to. A patched altitude setting was fixed near this mountain to prevent the player from thrusting over it any other way. In addition to areas of interest, there are towers for acquiring insight of the map. The layers in each region make it difficult to know where to go. Activating the towers was fun when I first started, but after playing countless minigames at Costa del Sol, the concept started to blur fast. Each region has a replicated theme of catching chocobos, finding treasure areas, following owls to scan data crystals, and doing a ton of optional side jobs just because they cross your path. The payoff is pieces of world lore and, of course, a share of guild items and material that we all come to expect. Chadley's data battles are back, which adds another way to collect. What really makes this tiring, though, is the unusual delay in between the collecting, slow QuickTime events for scanning crystals, memory QTEs just for weakening summon, sneaking around chocobos and thugs. I mean, let's be real. Sneaking about in a game that is heavy on action doesn't make a lot of sense. If Mercury Steam can get unfavored criticism for having stealth segments in their Lords of Shadow 2 game, then why is it okay for Rebirth? The solo mission for Kate Sith has weird pacing also. Not only is it awkward throwing the boxes, pick up with L2, aim holding R1, and then pressing square, the movement doesn't move very quickly for a puzzle solver. It makes me think of Barrett's solo mission from Remake, which also felt like a clock eater. Surely, the purpose is to give each character some me time, so I expect there to be even more of these solo missions in the next part of the series. Reaching the game's climax at the Temple of the Ancients, The game forces the player to continue towards the end credits. Instead of permitting a return to the world map, you go straight to the Forgotten Capital without a break and immediately into a series of boss fights. The battles are brutal there also, so planning first needs to be done before going there. If not, there is a great chance that you'll be stuck to grind and forced to improvise on your character builds. It's not such an unusual push for an RPG, but I never expected to endure all of that without a break. An update was released by Square Enix about a week or so after the fast travel bug. The update came with a patch that fixed the bug and other problems within a week's time. This displays the commitment that Square Enix has with the project, making certain that the brand maintains its streak of high quality. But the game doesn't end here. If players stand the chance of winning Rebirth's open world challenges, side quests, and mini-games galore, the third and final part is planned to bring Cloud and his allies to the end of their journey. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is not an add-on to Remake, as I once thought. So with that, a score can be given. My score for Remake is 10. My score for Rebirth is a solid 8 out of 10. Rebirth is a great game, with much more to do, but the extras and also traversing draws back on the pacing and makes me less inclined to re-engage in the activities it has to offer. Hard mode is a greater challenge, but I do prefer Remake's precision fighting over the button mashing in Rebirth. You might say that I haven't gotten into the core of the battle editions, but I felt like Remake had a decent enough balance. The battle and enemy variety, however, gets a warm welcome.
That's a mighty fine staircase. Thank you, kind.
Thank you for joining me on this very long and in-depth review of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Please enjoy your day, and I will see you next time.